My name is Atsuhide. You can call me Atsu. I'm Senior Research Fellow in Solent University, and today I'm going to explain the project and also the task I want to give you, and discuss this phrase, exploring identity in art. So first of all, the starting point is really to question the notion of identity. So firstly, that you might think that I'm going to talk about identity as something about who you are, but actually I might start to question that to begin with. So actually identity is about negotiations between what is expected on you and how you take in charge of who you want to become. The word identity actually comes from the Latin word idem, meaning the same. I want to start off with Frida Kahlo's self-portrait. So on the left you have Frida Kahlo being the little deer which is hunted and injured. So there's a kind of sense of vulnerability and sense of injury which was true in her real life, but also in her psychological life as well. And I have here the citation from the Italian media theorist Franco Beraldi. He says, identity is the projection of some traits from the past on the imagination of the future. Identity is the fixation and process of identification that generally reduces complexity to a predictable pattern of behavior. So in a way that you are really complex, but actually by identifying with certain kind of characters or roles that your complexity, your being might be reduced to some simpler traits that people can identify. And secondly, here he says identity is based on an imaginary sense of belonging to a common past, while cultural becoming anticipates the future inscribed in the present of social life. What he's saying is that when society is in crisis, people tend to crave for identities because your sense of being is insecure and you want to find where you can belong to. So here finally he says identity is a psychopolitical construct that generally holds together a social body that has lost its sense of solidarity. When you look at the image on the right, Frida Kahlo's self-portrait, such a famous set of portraits that is taken up by others. For instance, this is contemporary Japanese artist Yasumasa Morimura. He's male and he's transferring himself into the female artist in the early 20th century. So that there's a transgression from male Japanese artist to female Mexican artist in the early 20th century. So that in a way that identity is something which isn't fixed, but actually which is very fluid and flexible, and something actually a lot more fragile than you might expect. Similarly, when you look at American artist Cindy Sherman's work on the left, she's appropriating Caravaggio, Italian Baroque painter's work, and she's placing herself in the figure in Caravaggio's painting. And on the right, she's casting herself as a female figure in fictional film noir film still. Film noir is a movement in film in, let's say, around 1950s. So it's a kind of particular kind of representation of the feminine and women. And so again, that she's playing up being male in Caravaggio's painting in the Baroque period, but on the right she's presenting something is expected on the women actresses to look like in the 1950s, for instance. So again, that identity is something fluid and fragile and also precarious. this is a Cuban artist, Ana Mendieta's work from 1972. So that she's putting a mustache, and again, there's a gender fluidity here, that what is meant to be masculine, what is meant to be feminine, these are really negotiable, but also expected on you. And then she's kind of fighting back against the kind of expectation on her to be a particular kind of femininity that she needs to perform and present. On the right, there are some texts here that, for instance, Jacques Derrida, who was a French, really well-known French, prominent French philosopher, but actually he was born in Algeria, and also he was Jewish. So in a way, we have a complex set of identities, and we are made up of these kind of different cultural traits as well. So it's a lot more complex than we might assume when you think about who you are, who I am, who others are. And here we get the extras, photographs of bullfighters. In these photographs, that these bullfighters are presenting themselves in front of the camera. And then, of course, bullfighting is a very masculine activity, that you have to tame bulls. But here these photographs show that they are slightly fragile, they are slightly vulnerable. So again, that we might think that masculinity is something given, but actually to be a man isn't something natural, but actually it's a form of performance, form of practice of being male. Similarly, American photographer Alec Soth's work. So the man in the photograph is probably a soldier, but there's something in the awkward and clumsy way that he's putting jam on the bread, and he looks like he's becoming a man, or he's becoming probably a professional soldier. But still, there's a kind of in between adulthood and youth. So again, that a particular kind of identity, such as man or child or youth, these are really workable and working practices of performing to be taking up certain kind of roles in society. Melanie Marchot's work, so she photographed her daughter age between 11 and 18. So according to the age and different times, the presentation of femininity is very much different, and the way that she faces the camera is quite different again. Again, it's really about performing and practicing identity in everyday life. Moving from sort of gender and age, I'm moving towards more ethnic identity as well. So in this work, the figure in the photograph is holding the dictator, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein's photograph. In a way, it might be about the Western perception on the Iraqi population that is very much covered by the image of the dictator Saddam Hussein during the Iraqi war. So although there's an individual, perhaps it's a woman in the room, but actually it's really the face is taken up by the image of Saddam Hussein. Similarly, Shirin Nishat's work, again, it's maybe the Western perception of the women, and so that maybe Muslim women may be seen as submissive or passive, but actually in this photograph, the artist is presenting herself as a very defiant character holding a rifle, and then actually she is presenting women's role in the Iranian society as well here. And what you can do in your project is also to use fabric or cloth as something useful or expressive of your identity. Yinka Shonibare was born in Nigeria but brought up in the UK, so he's referring to his cultural heritage, but also that he's bringing in the issue of colonialism here in this work. And we talk gender fluidity here in this work, that for instance there's a cloth which is tied around her breast, and so there's a kind of suppression and oppression of gender in which you might identify, but actually that socially certain kind of roles or gender identification are imposed on you. So there's a kind of a conflict or negotiation between what is expected on you and then how you feel who you are. Similarly, that the hair can be used in mark of certain kind of identities, but then here Ellen Gallagher is using these different hairstyles in a very playful way to bringing in identity issues. The Japanese artist Yoshitomo Nara's work on the left, so that he's obviously bringing in post-Second World War Japanese popular culture into fine art platform, and it is interesting that, for instance, on the right I have this quote from Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek. He is talking about how your identity is a network of understanding of who you are, and then expectations and responses to who you are meant to be, in a way that you are all of these things. You are a complex being who is alive and living at present. So cannot be really simply reducible to one kind of identity or another. And then he's obviously contesting that there's a facade that you present, and then there's something like a single core or kernel inside you that is kind of fixed and stable. Actually, we are more dynamic and complex beings. And also that you're expected to be presentable. You might be good looking, or you might be beautiful and everything else. In this work, People at the Risk is squashing her face onto a glass, and also smearing her lipsticks onto the glass. In a way, she's going against these expectations that you are meant to be presentable and looking good all the time. And so in a way, identity may be about, really more about how you respond to expectations on you, and actually the desire you have in which how you want to live your life. So that might be, so this kind of dynamics of how you negotiate with social others and how you feel about yourself is something beyond how you are able to express in language. So in a way, that's why art is very, very important. That's what French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan talks about. In a way, that's something, sort of something internal in you that is really sort of quite undigestible, that could really come out through practice of art. So in this image, Jimmy Durham has one part of the face covered with mud, the other part is clean. So in a way, you might be really complex, but also that there's a sense of duality in you, that while you're kind of negotiating your sense of who you are or who you are becoming. So the task is, first of all, I want you to think about what you are supposed to identify with regarding gender, ethnicity, age, appearances, or any other expectations. Secondly, I want you to make a piece of work, artwork, that's about who you want to be and what kind of unique being you can be in this world. For this task, I suppose you have a lot of other work to do, so you don't need to make a laborious and invested work. It can be a really simple work, but it can be exciting. It can be very subtle and very thoughtful, or it can be really, really dynamic, or it can be very conceptual rather than visual. And you don't need to be afraid of failures. That's part of art practice. Okay, looking forward to talking to you, and then looking forward to discussing your work soon.